Hey everybody, it's Audrey. I'm sharing a video today with you for Just Nick, and I am using the free cut file for the month of June, which you can go to the Just Nick blog right now and go get it for yourself. And this is called Tic-Tac-Toe, and it's a super fun grid design. So there are a lot of possibilities with this, and grids are really fun to work with. So I am working with it in Silhouette Studio here, and I've traced it, and I'm going to make it fill up my whole page. And you could make it smaller and kind of use it as like a background pattern or something behind a photo, but I've just decided to make mine take up the whole page. And do you see how there's like squares, and then there are sections with those other little cutout shapes? Well, what I did was I copied one of the squares, and I put it over the other little group of shapes there to make it a whole separate element. Because if you go back to the original, you can see that like the little cutout shapes, the lines, and a little cluster of like squares, they're little dots, don't have a square around them. So I'm going to make those a separate shape, and I'm just copying and paste them over here, and I'm going to cut those out of pattern paper, and I'm going to layer it over the top of this shot right here, which I'm going to cut out of white cardstock. You'll see what I mean when I start getting into the layout. It's hard to explain just by looking in Silhouette Studio, but that's what I did. So if you watch the layout process and then you go back and watch what I did in Silhouette, you'll understand how I got where I did. So I've cut it out of paper and just white cardstock, and I wanted to have one really big photo, and I didn't want to fill all the squares with photos. So I just had 3 photos here and one large focal photo that took up the size of the squares. And I am using this 6x6 paper pack from Project Life. I can't remember right now off the top of my head what the pattern is called, or the collection. It's got to be in the front somewhere there. But anyway, I loved these colors for boy pages. I thought this was an awesome palette for boys. It's great. It has like that kind of like a citron yellow. I guess it's a little bit more mustardy yellow. And then some reds and navy, and it's just super fun color palette. So I cut a whole bunch of those separate square shapes out that have the patterns inside, and you can see I put them on top of the layout. And now I'm just going to go through and cut out a couple of solid squares that will fill up some of the other empty squares there. So there's a lot of different shapes going on here. I have solid squares. I have places on the layout where it's just an open square, which I'll fill from the back. And then on these little 6x6 papers here, you can see I've cut out the squares with the pattern inside them from the pattern paper. So again, lots of layers. There's paper behind the white cardstock, then there's papers on top of the, glued on top of the white cardstock, and then there are papers popped off of the cardstock. So anyway, you'll see as we go through. So I pulled out a whole bunch of other boy embellishments from some other lines. This is the crepe paper Boys Rule line. I found this little phrase on the chipboard pack that said "cool dude," which is perfect for the photo, and the colors were absolutely perfect for these papers too. So that had to be my title. And we call my son Dude. Like, I call him Dude all the time, which has kind of sometimes we end up calling him Duty, and I don't know. That may not be a very good nickname. We might regret that someday. But anyway, so we call him Dude all the time. So I just love this title for this page. And these were chipboard that were self-adhesive, but I do go back and glue them down because they weren't sticking on very well. And I mentioned in another video that I kind of learned my lesson about not gluing them down, because even ones that are super sticky, they will come off if you don't glue them down. So I'm going through here, and I'm going to start gluing some of the squares to the background. And I'm trying to, this is tough because I'm trying to arrange the squares to kind of get a balance of colors all over the page. And see, I'm tapping my fingers there because I'm trying to find something else with navy, because I have that one pattern that's the second square up from the bottom there towards the left. It has the stripes on it, and it has a lot of navy in it, and I didn't have a lot of navy anywhere else. So I'm trying to find some other little bits that have navy. And that square right underneath the D in the word dude, I know I'm going to save for my journaling. So I just put a little piece of scrap, one of the scrap white squares there, just kind of as a place saver so that I can go back and add my journaling. Now, if you see what I did there up in the right corner, the reason I made those squares with out of the pattern paper with the shapes cut out is so that I could layer them on top of the white cardstock, which would have another piece of pattern paper behind it, so that I have the blue paper, I'm talking about the top right square, the blue paper from the back, and then the white cardstock, and then the yellowish shaped square with those shapes popped out or punched out from the top. So that you get those different layers of color underneath. Otherwise, if you just cut it as is and don't create those squares, you're going to get all shapes like I have on the bottom right, which is just the different shapes cut out without having the little, you're going to have all the little lines cut out without having the squares cut out around them. I actually probably sound like I'm just blabbering about this, but it's a little hard to talk about, and you probably can visualize it better through the video as you watch. Anyway, so again, I'm trying to balance the colors, and because there are so many squares on here, it's kind of difficult to do like a perfect visual triangle. So just scattering the colors around, making sure there's like one of each color in pretty much in each column and each row. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be, it's going to be a good, good distribution of the colors around. So the squares that have that were cut out of the pattern paper and are I'm popping up off of the design just to add a little bit more just dimension and some more fun layers. And I had, when I was creating this in Silhouette Studio, and well, when I was resizing it in Silhouette Studio, I measured the size of the squares in the Silhouette Studio so that when I went to go print my photos, I knew exactly what size to print so that they would fit right in the middle. And I think at some point I'm going to do a process video on how I print my photos to size using Photoshop Elements 13. I print all my photos in Photoshop at different sizes, whatever size I want. So I think I might do a little tutorial about how to do that at some point in my free time. Okay, so I did something kind of silly, and that is, well, I didn't know exactly where I was going to put my photos at first. So all the squares were cut out, but that's where I'm going to put my photos, but I kind of need something to glue the photos to. So I have to go back through, and that's what I'm doing right here, and I'm just adding white squares, white scraps of paper underneath the squares where my photos are going to go so that I can pop my photos off the page, because otherwise it was just kind of an open square, and I didn't have anything to adhere the photo to. So that was kind of silly of me not to think about that beforehand. But anyway, simple fix. Just went through, put some scraps in the back, and that gave me some support to stick my photo on. When I'm arranging my photos here, I always try to arrange my photos so that the person in the photo is looking towards the center of the page. So if the person is looking, like that picture I'm working right there with on the right, you see he's facing more towards the center of the page. And I think that helps the person looking at the page bring their focus to the center of the page, because it looks like the person in the photo is kind of looking towards the center of the page. So I try to do that whenever I put my my pictures on a page. So okay, so you can see I have stitched some black lines just around the boxes where the photos are. I didn't want to stitch the whole grid. I wanted to kind of leave it kind of a little bit abstract in that regard, so not a perfect grid. So I've only stitched around the big photo and the 3 squares where the little photo is going to go. And I realized when I stitched in the size I had printed my photos, I always leave a white border on my photos, but I didn't account for that when I did my stitching, so I had to trim my smaller photos and take the white border off so that the stitching would show, because the photos with the white border were just a little bit too big and covered up the stitching a little bit. So I'm cutting up all my pop dots here in my tape strips and popping my photos off the page. These are the ThermaWeb 3D strips that I use. I always use the ThermaWeb foam dots or foam squares and foam strips for all of my little bits that I want to pop off. Okay, so you can see I have scattered some embellishments over there on the side. I just went through a whole bunch of other packs of embellishments, mostly from the Crepe Paper Boys Rule line, and just trying to find some things to fit in the page. And I've taken a couple extra of the white squares that got cut out, and I'm trimming them down just a little bit to make them a tiny bit smaller to fit in those empty spaces. And I'm tracing a square around the edge with just a black pen to make them stand out a little bit more. So I actually have a white piece of paper there that I'm drawing around and tracing that around the edge to get the perfect square. And you can see I've added some mist droplets too, and that's a color called Cinder. It's an old GlimmerMist. These stars are vellum, as are some of these other, I think most of these little bits are vellum, but again, the colors were just perfect. The kind of dark teal blue and that very bright red, and even a little bit of the kind of mustardy greenish yellow there. There were so many things to choose from, and I wanted to use so many of the little sayings and shapes, but I felt like my page was already really busy with all the squares and all the different patterns that I couldn't add too much more because it was going to get a little out of control. So to help kind of ease the eye a little bit, whenever I do something that has very strong grid design or very strong straight lines, I like to add circular elements. And so I found some couple circle stickers and some Flair that I thought would be good to help soften some of the lines. And the Flair, that one says rad. I actually don't end up using that one. I pick a different one that's a black one. I can't remember what it says now, but those are all from one of the Cocoa Vanilla lines. I can't remember. Maybe it's Made of Awesome. I think that's what the line was, Made of Awesome. So now with those circles, though, I am trying to create a visual triangle. So I have that round circle down at the bottom that says dude, and then I have the piece of Flair to the left of the photo that says rad, and I'm trying to find another circular element to put up there on the right, again, to kind of create that visual triangle. So I'm just playing around with those circles a little bit and trying to figure out where I want to put those. So lastly here, I'm cutting out this pattern paper. I thought these little starburst shapes would be awesome little embellishments, so I fussy cut a whole bunch of them out and popped them off in different spots. And this is pretty much my finished page. So you can see where I put some of those starbursts there and pop some of the vellum off and my sewing and all kinds of goodies there. So don't forget to go grab this free cut file and have fun with it. Thanks.